The buzzing of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled in the dark, my heart racing as I squinted at the bright screen. 3:17 a.m. Who could be texting at this hour? Mike's name flashed across the top, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced over at my husband's empty side of the bed. He was working the night shift at the mall again, or so he'd said. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the phone and read the message. "Sorry, babe. Won't make it home tonight. Covering for Jim." My stomach churned. This was the third time this month he'd stayed out all night. I scrolled through his recent messages, my suspicion growing with each swipe. "Can't wait to see you again. Miss your touch. You're so beautiful." None of these were to me. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The bedroom suddenly felt suffocating. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes and thinning hair that Mike never failed to point out. "You're being paranoid, Emily," I whispered to myself, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Mom?" Kelly's voice called out. "Is everything okay?" I opened the door to find my daughter, bleary-eyed but concerned. "Sorry, sweetie. Did I wake you?" She shook her head. "I heard you get up. Is it Dad again?" The perceptiveness in her eyes made my heart ache. At 18, she shouldn't have to worry about her parents' marriage. I forced a smile. "It's nothing, honey. Go back to bed." Kelly hesitated, then said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad." My breath caught in my throat. "What is it?" She bit her lip, looking torn. I saw him yesterday, at the coffee shop near the mall. He was with someone." "A coworker?" I asked, clinging to hope. Kelly shook her head slowly. "It was a woman I've never seen before. They looked close." The room spun around me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Are you sure?" "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to say anything, but after seeing his text." She gestured towards the phone on my nightstand. I took a deep breath, trying to process this information. "Thank you for telling me, Kelly. We'll figure this out, okay?" She nodded, giving me a quick hug before retreating to her room. I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. After 20 years of marriage, could Mike really be cheating on me? I thought back to our arranged marriage, orchestrated by our parents who thought we'd be a perfect match. Mike, the charming janitor with big dreams, and me, the dedicated nurse. We'd made it work, or so I thought. The first rays of sunlight were peeking through the curtains when I heard the front door open. Mike's heavy footsteps echoed through the house. I steeled myself, determined to confront him. He appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to see me awake. "Emily, what are you doing up so early?" I held up his phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "Care to explain these messages, Mike?" His face paled, then quickly morphed into a mask of innocence. "What messages? You know I hate when you go through my phone." "Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "Who is she?" Mike's jaw clenched. "It's nothing, just a friend." "A friend you can't wait to see again? A friend you miss touching?" My voice cracked, betraying my hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Look, Emily, it's not what you think. You're overreacting as usual." "As usual?" I stood up, anger replacing my sadness. "You mean like how I overreact when you constantly criticize my appearance? My thinning hair?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself." "Stop," I cut him off. "Just stop. I want the truth, Mike. Are you having an affair?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, I knew. My world shattered, leaving me standing amidst the ruins of our marriage, wondering how I'd ever put the pieces back together. The hospital corridors felt colder than usual as I made my rounds. My mind kept drifting back to Mike's half-hearted denials and the look in his eyes when I confronted him. I shook my head, trying to focus on my patients. They deserved better than a distracted nurse. "Emily?" Dr. Patel's voice snapped me back to reality. "Are you all right? You seem a bit off today." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. What can I do for you?" He handed me a chart. "Mrs. Johnson in 305 needs her meds, and Emily, if you need to talk, my door's always open." I nodded gratefully and headed to Mrs. Johnson's room. As I administered her medication, she studied me with wise, wrinkled eyes. "Trouble at home, dear?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then sighed. "Is it that obvious?" She patted my hand. "When you've been around as long as I have, you learn to read people. Don't let it dim your light, honey." Her words struck a chord. How long had I been letting Mike dim my light? I thought back to the early days of our marriage. He'd been so charming then, full of big dreams. But as the years passed, those dreams never materialized. Instead, he bounced from job to job while I worked long hours at the hospital to keep us afloat. My shift ended, and I dreaded going home. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I gripped the steering wheel, anger bubbling up inside me. How many nights had I heard that excuse? How many times had I rearranged my schedule to accommodate his ever-changing jobs? At home, I found Kelly in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. The smell of burnt pasta filled the air. "Oh, Mom," she exclaimed. "I wanted to surprise you, but I think I messed up." I couldn't help but laugh. "It's the thought that counts, sweetie. How about we order pizza instead?" As we sat eating, Kelly cleared her throat. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Why do you let Dad treat you the way he does?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She set down her slice, looking serious. "The way he criticizes you all the time, especially about your hair. It's not right, Mom." I touched my thinning hair self-consciously. Mike's voice echoed in my head. "You're letting yourself go, Emily. No wonder I have to work so hard to look at you." "It's complicated, Kelly," I said weakly. "No, it's not," she insisted. "You deserve better. You're beautiful, Mom, and smart and kind. Dad's an idiot if he can't see that." Tears welled up in my eyes. When did my daughter become so wise? Just then, the front door slammed. Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Where's my dinner?" he demanded. I stood up, anger replacing my earlier sadness. "You said you were working late. We didn't know when you'd be home." He scoffed. "Right, because it's so hard to keep a plate warm. What do you even do all day, Emily?" Kelly jumped to her feet. "She saves lives, Dad. What do you do besides criticize her?" Mike's face darkened. "Watch your tone, young lady. This is between your mother and me." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "Kelly's right. I'm tired of your criticism, Mike. I'm tired of feeling like I'm not enough." He laughed bitterly. "Not enough? Look at yourself, Emily. Your hair's falling out, you've gained weight, you're hardly the woman I married." The words stung, but I stood my ground. "And you're hardly the man I thought I married, a man who respects his wife, who contributes to his family." Mike's eyes narrowed. "You want to talk about contributions? Who do you think pays for this roof over your head?" "I do," I shouted, years of frustration pouring out. "I pay the mortgage, the bills, Kelly's tuition. What do you contribute besides empty promises and cruel words?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mike stared at me, shock and anger warring on his face. Kelly looked between us, worry etched in her features. Finally, Mike spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave." My heart pounded, but I held firm. "Maybe you should." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As the sound echoed through the house, I realized with startling clarity that our marriage was beyond repair. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, lost in thought. It had been 3 days since Mike stormed out, and the house felt eerily quiet without his constant criticism. Kelly shuffled in, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "Any word from Dad?" I shook my head. "Nothing. But don't worry, honey. We'll be okay." She nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad." My heart sank. "What is it?" Kelly took a deep breath. "Remember when I told you I saw him at the coffee shop? Well, I didn't tell you everything. He was with a woman, young, brunette, and they were kissing." The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Hot coffee splashed my legs, but I barely felt it. "Are you sure?" Kelly nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you sooner." I hugged her tightly, my mind reeling. "It's not your fault, sweetie. Thank you for telling me." After Kelly left for school, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Mike's number on my phone. My finger hovered over the call button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. Instead, I dialed another number. "Ace Investigations, how can I help you?" An hour later, I sat across from Jack Reeves, a private investigator with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "So, Mrs. Roberts, you suspect your husband is having an affair?" I nodded, twisting my wedding ring. "I need to know for sure. Can you help me?" Jack leaned forward. "We'll get to the bottom of this, ma'am. But I have to warn you. Are you prepared for what we might find? Was I? The thought of concrete proof made my stomach churn. But I squared my shoulders and met his gaze. Yes, I need the truth. Over the next week, I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety. Jack called with updates, each one chipping away at my hope. Mike's late nights weren't at the mall. His work trips were to a nearby hotel. Finally, Jack asked me to meet him at a cafe downtown. As I approached, I saw him sitting at an outdoor table, a thick envelope in front of him. "Mrs. Roberts," he said gently, "I have the evidence you asked for." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Mike with a young brunette, holding hands, kissing, entering a hotel. My vision blurred as I flipped through them. "I'm sorry," Jack said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. As I gathered the photos, a familiar figure caught my eye. I froze, my blood running cold. "Mrs. Roberts, are you all right?" I held up one of the photos, my voice barely a whisper. "I know her." Jack leaned in. "The woman your husband's with." "Yes," I say, anger replacing shock. "It's Linda, Mike's mother." Jack's eyes widened. "His mother?" I shook my head, memories flooding back. Not his biological mother, his stepmother. She married Mike's father when Mike was in his 20s. She's only a few years older than him. The pieces started falling into place. Linda's hostility towards me, the knowing looks between her and Mike at family gatherings. How could I have been so blind? "Mrs. Roberts," Jack said gently, "what do you want to do now?" I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. "Now, I want a divorce." As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "We need to talk. I'm coming home tonight." I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream and demand answers. But another part, a stronger part, knew it was time to take control of my life. I typed a reply, "Don't bother. I know about Linda. Your things will be on the porch. Don't come inside." My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Taking a deep breath, I pressed send and watched as my message delivered, signaling the end of my marriage and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I walked up to my house, I saw Kelly waiting on the porch, concern etched on her face. I realized then that while one chapter was ending, the most important one, my life with my daughter, was still being written. And this time, I would make sure it had a happier ending. The weight of the manila envelope felt like a ton of bricks in my hands as I paced the living room. Inside were the divorce papers I had drawn up, a decision that had taken every ounce of courage I possessed. Kelly watched me from the couch, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and support. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" she asked softly. I paused, meeting her gaze. "I have to be, honey. We deserve better than this." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made my heart race. Mike was home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Kelly, why don't you go to your room?" I suggested, not wanting her to witness what was about to unfold. She hesitated, then nodded, giving me a quick hug before disappearing upstairs. The front door opened, and Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Emily?" he called out, his words slurring slightly. "Where's my dinner?" I stepped into the hallway, the envelope clutched to my chest like a shield. "We need to talk, Mike." He squinted at me, then at the envelope. "What's that?" Without a word, I handed it to him. He fumbled with the clasp, pulling out the papers. As his eyes scanned the first page, his face contorted from confusion to shock, then anger. "Divorce papers," he spat. "What the hell is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want a divorce." Mike laughed bitterly. "You can't be serious, after everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You mean the lies, the affairs, the constant criticism?" His eyes narrowed. "Affairs? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos the private investigator had sent me. "I know about Linda, Mike. Your stepmother? Really?" The color drained from his face as I showed him the evidence. For a moment, he looked like he might crumple, but then his expression hardened. "You had me followed?" he growled. "You invaded my privacy?" "Don't you dare turn this around on me," I shot back. "You've been cheating on me with your stepmother. You've made me feel worthless for years. It ends now." Mike's fist slammed against the wall, making me flinch. "You can't do this to me, Emily. I was going to leave you after retirement, take my pension, and start over. You're ruining everything." His words hit me like a slap in the face. You were planning to leave me? After all these years? He sneered. Look at you. Your hair's falling out. You've let yourself go. Did you really think I'd stick around forever? Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up anger and hurt came pouring out. I've supported us for years while you jumped from job to job. I've raised our daughter, paid our bills, and put up with your abuse. No more, Mike. It's over. You'll regret this. He snarled, crumpling the divorce papers in his fist. I'll make sure you don't get a penny. I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. Try it. I have evidence of your affair, your financial negligence. Do you really want to take this to court? For a moment, fear flashed in his eyes. Then, without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my legs giving out as the adrenaline faded. Kelly appeared at the top of the stairs, tears in her eyes. Mom? She called softly. Are you okay? I looked up at her, managing a small smile. I will be, honey. We both will be. As Kelly came down to sit beside me, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us, one where we wouldn't let anyone make us feel small ever again. What happens now? Kelly asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a newfound strength coursing through me. Now, we rebuild. Together. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. Squinting at the clock, I saw it was barely 5 a.m. My heart raced as I answered, Hello? Emily. It's Carol, your mother-in-law. Her voice was tight with worry. Mike's here. He's not in a good state. I sat up, fully alert now. What do you mean? He's drunk, ranting about divorce papers and how you're trying to ruin him. Emily, what's going on? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Carol, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Mike's been having an affair with Linda. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Carol spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Linda? His stepmother? Yes, I confirmed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I have proof. I'm filing for divorce. Carol's sharp intake of breath was audible. Oh, Emily, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I assured her. This isn't your fault. He wants to talk to you, Carol said suddenly. He's demanding it. Should I put him on? My instinct was to refuse, but something made me hesitate. Okay, I heard myself say. Mike's voice came through, slurred and angry. Emily, you can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way. Mike, it's over, I said firmly. We both know it. You think you can just throw me away? He snarled. After everything? I made you who you are. His words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I was that insecure young woman again, desperate for his approval. But then I thought of Kelly, of the strength I'd found in standing up to him. No, Mike, I said, my voice steady. I made myself who I am, despite you, not because of you. He laughed bitterly. You're nothing without me, Emily. Your thinning hair, I cut him off. Goodbye, Mike. Don't call again unless it's through our lawyers. I ended the call, my hands shaking. As I set the phone down, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My hair, the source of so much of Mike's criticism, seemed to mock me. Without thinking, I grabbed a pair of scissors from my dresser. Strand by strand, I began to cut. With each snip, I felt a weight lifting. By the time Kelly found me, tear-streaked and surrounded by fallen hair, I felt lighter than I had in years. Mom? Kelly's voice was filled with concern. What happened? I turned to her, managing a small smile. I'm taking control, honey. No more letting your father's words define me. Kelly's eyes widened, then softened with understanding. She grabbed another pair of scissors. Let me help you even it out. As we worked together, I filled Kelly in on Mike's call. Her jaw clenched with anger, but she remained focused on the task at hand. You know, she said, as she trimmed the back of my hair, Aunt Sarah went through something similar with her ex. She said the hardest part was facing everyone after. I hadn't thought about that. The idea of facing our friends, our extended family, filled me with dread. But then I caught sight of my new reflection, shorter hair, tear-stained cheeks, but eyes bright with determination. We'll face them together, I said, squeezing Kelly's hand. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Linda. We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th at noon. My stomach churned. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut all ties with that part of my life. But another part, the part that had found the strength to stand up to Mike, knew this was a conversation I needed to have. I showed Kelly the text. What do you think? She studied it for a moment, then looked at me with a mix of concern and pride. "I think you should go, Mom. You deserve answers." I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This meeting with Linda could go 1,000 different ways, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. As I got ready to leave, I caught my reflection one last time. The woman staring back at me wasn't perfect. Her hair was uneven, her eyes tired, but I was strong. But she was ready. I was ready. The cafe bustled with the lunch crowd as I sat across from Linda, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, and the woman who'd been having an affair with my husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Emily," Linda began, her voice low, "I know you must hate me." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. "Hate is too simple a word for what I feel, Linda." She nodded, looking down at her untouched coffee. "I understand, but there's something you need to know about Mike, something that might affect your divorce settlement." My guard went up immediately. "What are you talking about?" Linda took a deep breath. "Mike's in debt, serious debt. He's been gambling, Emily, for years." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Gambling? But how? Where did he get the money?" "He's been dipping into his retirement fund," Linda explained, her face grim. "And he took out a second mortgage on your house without telling you." My mind reeled. Our house, the home where I'd raised Kelly, where I'd poured my heart and soul, was at risk. How much? I managed to ask. Linda slid a piece of paper across the table. The number written on it made my blood run cold. "This can't be right," I whispered. "I'm afraid it is," Linda said softly. "Emily, I'm so sorry for everything. The affair, keeping this from you. I thought I loved him, but Mike, he's not the man either of us thought he was." I barely heard her apology, my mind racing with the implications. If this was true, the divorce settlement I'd been counting on, the fresh start I'd been planning for Kelly and me, was in jeopardy. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "Emily, we need to talk. New information has come to light about Mike's finances. Call me ASAP." I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. "I have to go." Linda reached out, grabbing my wrist. "Emily, wait, there's more." I paused, dreading what else she could possibly tell me. "Mike, he's planning to contest the divorce. He's going to claim you were emotionally abusive, that you drove him to the affair. He's going to try to take everything, Emily." The room spun around me. I yanked my arm free and stumbled out of the cafe, gasping for air. On the sidewalk, I fumbled with my phone, dialing my lawyer with shaking hands. As it rang, I caught sight of my reflection in a store window. My new, shorter haircut, a symbol of my newfound strength, seemed to mock me now. "Emily?" My lawyer's voice came through. "I'm glad you called. We need to discuss." "I know," I cut him off. "I just found out about the debt, the gambling, all of it. What do we do?" He sighed heavily. "It's not good, Emily. Mike's financial situation complicates things significantly, and if he contests the divorce as he's threatening to..." "He can't win," I said, my voice rising with panic. "He can't take everything. I have proof of the affair." "Infidelity doesn't carry as much weight as you might think in court," he explained gently, "and if he can make a case for emotional abuse..." I leaned against the building, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Everything I'd fought for, the future I'd envisioned for Kelly and me, was slipping away. Just then, I saw Mike across the street, emerging from a pawn shop. Our eyes met, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He knew he had the upper hand. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear and panic gave way to a white-hot rage. I'd let Mike control me for too long, let him make me feel small and worthless. No more. "Emily?" My lawyer's voice sounded distant. "Are you still there? What do you want to do?" I watched Mike saunter away, his arrogance palpable even from a distance. My jaw clenched, determination flooding through me. "Fight," I said, my voice steel. "We fight with everything we've got. I won't let him win. Not this time." As I ended the call, I knew the real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt truly ready. Mike might think he held all the cards, but he was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. The bridal shop's bell chimed as Kelly twirled in her wedding gown, her face radiant with joy. My heart swelled with pride and love, momentarily pushing aside the storm of the ongoing divorce battle. "Mom, what do you think?" Kelly asked, her eyes sparkling. I blinked back tears. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart." As Kelly changed back into her regular clothes, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. With trembling fingers, I answered. "Emily, we've hit a snag," he said, his voice grave. "Mike's lawyer is pushing for a larger share of your assets, citing your emotional abuse as grounds for compensation." My stomach dropped. "But that's ridiculous. He's the one who—" "I know," my lawyer cut in, "but they're presenting a compelling case. We need to consider settling, Emily. The longer this drags on, the more you stand to lose." I ended the call, feeling numb. Kelly emerged from the dressing room, her smile fading as she saw my expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" I forced a smile. "Nothing, honey, just some legal stuff." Kelly's eyes narrowed. "Is it Dad? What's he done now?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike. "We need to talk, for Kelly's sake." I showed Kelly the message, watching her face cloud over. "You're not going to meet him, are you?" she asked. I sighed. "I think I have to, sweetie, for the sake of ending this nightmare." Kelly grabbed my hand. "Then I'm coming with you." An hour later, we sat across from Mike in a quiet corner of a local diner. He looked haggard, his eyes darting between Kelly and me. "Kelly," he began, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry for everything. I want to make things right." Kelly's jaw clenched. "By trying to take everything from Mom? By lying about her in court?" Mike flinched. "It's complicated, honey. Your mother." "Don't you dare," I cut in, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare try to turn her against me." Mike's eyes hardened. "Fine, let's cut to the chase. I want to come to the wedding, Emily. It's my right as her father." Kelly stood up abruptly. "No, absolutely not." "Kelly, please," Mike pleaded. "I know I've made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" Kelly's voice rose. "You cheated on Mom with Linda. You gambled away our future. You're trying to destroy Mom in court. Those aren't mistakes, Dad. Those are choices." Mike's face reddened. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I interjected, finding strength in Kelly's words. "You've made your choices, Mike. Now live with them. You're not coming to the wedding. You're not getting more than you deserve in the divorce, and you're certainly not going to bully us anymore." Mike's hand slammed on the table. "You can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way." "You'll what?" Kelly challenged. "Tell more lies, gamble away more money. Face it, Dad, you've lost, not just the divorce, but us." With that, Kelly stormed out of the diner. I stood to follow her, but Mike grabbed my arm. "Emily, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't let it end like this. We can start over, be a family again." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. But then I remembered the years of criticism, the affair, the lies. I gently removed his hand. "Goodbye, Mike," I said softly. "I hope you find peace." As I walked out of the diner, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There were still legal hurdles to overcome, but for the first time, I truly believed I would win. Outside, I found Kelly leaning against my car, tears streaming down her face. I pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. Kelly pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm proud of us, Mom. We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I nodded, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay." As we drove home, I realized that this wasn't just about winning the divorce or outsmarting Mike. It was about reclaiming our lives, our happiness. And with Kelly by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. The road ahead might be challenging, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would lead us. The gentle breeze carried the scent of roses as I stood in the garden, watching Kelly and her new husband, James, share their first dance as a married couple. The soft melody of their chosen song drifted through the air, and I found myself swaying slightly, a contented smile on my face. It had been a year since the divorce was finalized, a year of rebuilding and rediscovering myself. The legal battle had been brutal, but in the end, truth prevailed. Mike's lies unraveled in court, and his attempts to paint me as the villain backfired spectacularly. The judge saw through his deceit, and I walked away with a fair settlement and my dignity intact. As the dance ended, Kelly caught my eye and beckoned me over. I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers, accepting hugs and congratulations along the way. "Mom," Kelly beamed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Can you believe it? I'm married." I laughed, blinking back tears of joy. "I can, sweetheart. You and James are perfect for each other." James grinned, wrapping an arm around Kelly's waist. "We have something for you, Emily," he said, reaching into his pocket. Kelly's eyes sparkled with excitement as James pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped package. "Go on, Mom, open it." With trembling fingers, I unwrapped the gift. Inside was a stunning silk scarf, its vibrant colors shimmering in the late afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," I breathed, running my fingers over the soft fabric. Kelly stepped forward, gently taking the scarf and draping it around my shoulders. "We wanted you to have something special," she said softly. "Something to remind you how beautiful and strong you are." I touched the scarf, feeling a lump form in my throat. For so long, I had let Mike's cruel words about my thinning hair define me. But now, surrounded by love and acceptance, I realized how far I'd come. "Thank you," I whispered, pulling them both into a hug. "This means more than you know." As the reception continued, I found myself by the garden's edge, lost in thought. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the festivities, and I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. "Penny for your thoughts?" a familiar voice asked. I turned to see Carol, my former mother-in-law, standing beside me. Our relationship had been strained during the divorce, but we'd found our way back to each other in the months that followed. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I replied honestly. Carol nodded, her eyes kind. "You've come so far, Emily. I hope you know how proud we all are of you." I smiled, touching the scarf around my neck. "I'm proud of myself, too. For the first time in years, I feel free." As if on cue, the band struck up a lively tune. Carol grinned, holding out her hand. "Care to dance?" Laughing, I took her hand and let her lead me to the dance floor. As we twirled and swayed, I caught sight of Kelly and James, their faces alight with love and joy. My heart swelled with hope for their future, a future free from the pain and doubt that had clouded my own marriage. Later, as the night wound down and guests began to depart, Kelly found me once more. "Mom," she said, her voice soft and serious, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for showing me what real strength looks like." I cupped her face in my hands, overwhelmed with love for this incredible young woman. "Oh, Kelly, you've been my strength through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." As we embraced, I realized that this wasn't just Kelly's new beginning. It was mine, too. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I was excited to explore them. The last of the guests departed, leaving just our closest family and friends. As we gathered to see Kelly and James off on their honeymoon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The scarf around my neck fluttered in the breeze, a reminder of the love and support that surrounded me. Looking up at the star-filled sky, I made a silent wish for Kelly's marriage, for love, respect, and the strength to weather any storm. And as I watched the newlyweds drive away, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The chapter of my life with Mike had closed, but a new one was just beginning. And this time, I was the author of my own story.
Hello, I am Sophia, a 35-year-old woman, and I've been taking care of our home for 10 years now. My husband, Robert, is a doctor. We don't have kids, but we've been pretty happy, until one day, everything changed. Robert came home late, like usual, and dropped a bombshell. "I want a divorce," he said. "I'm marrying another woman." I was shocked. "What do you mean?" "We didn't marry for love," he added, and he was right. Our marriage was more of an arrangement. His parents wanted him to marry, and I guess I seemed like a good match. We barely knew each other before we tied the knot. The only thing we really had in common was our last name. Looking back, maybe I was drawn to the idea of sharing the same last name. So, we rushed into marriage, and for a while, we managed all right. I never thought we'd end up divorcing after 10 years. Even though our marriage wasn't built on love, we had been together for so long. But now, out of the blue, he wanted to marry someone else. "When did you start betraying me?" I asked. But Robert denied it. He said he met this nurse at the hospital about a year ago and was drawn to her charm. He claimed he was tired of living with someone as boring as me. I was shocked and hurt. "How can you say that after all these years?" I asked. But Robert was cold. He said living with me had been like hell and that he was done. I agreed to the divorce, even though it broke my heart. But then, Robert dropped another bombshell. He said we didn't even need to go through the legal process because he never officially registered our marriage. We were just living together, not legally married. I felt betrayed and angry. Robert had kept this secret from me all these years, and now he was using it to avoid giving me anything in the divorce. That day was supposed to be when he submitted our marriage registration. But instead, it was the day our marriage officially ended. I couldn't go because of an urgent matter, but it turns out he never submitted it. Not submitted. Are you joking? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. It's impossible that you didn't submit it. Normally, yes. That's why I made that rule at the beginning. If you went to the office, everything would be ruined. When we got married, we made some rules. I, as a homemaker, would handle all the household chores. I was on an allowance, and part-time work was prohibited. Robert would handle all governmental and official matters. Why would you do such a thing? I asked. Because I was about to be forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love. It's not like I was going to submit it easily. I was saving marriage for someone I was destined to be with. Then you should have refused the marriage proposal in the first place. I couldn't refuse. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. What would have happened if I said I didn't want to marry? Plus, I wanted a housekeeper. A housekeeper? I asked in disbelief. I'm a busy doctor and can't often tend to household chores. So, I decided to marry you as a housekeeper. It was a good deal for you too, right? You could eat well and have a roof over your head without working. You seemed desperate to get married too. What, were you probably feeling pressured because your friends were getting married, right? Robert sneered. Even though we weren't actually married, you were seen as the woman who married a doctor. This 10-year relationship was a win-win for both of us. That's all it was, and it ends today. You should be grateful for the good times you had. Now, you have to live on your own without relying on others. I was stunned. I can't believe this. Oh, and one more thing, Robert added with a smirk. Don't tell my parents about this. If you do something unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father, right? My heart skipped a beat. My father, who runs a medical equipment sales company, had a contract with the hospital where Robert worked. It was through my marriage to him that this connection was made. If I told my in-laws, Robert was implying he'd sever the contract as a threat. In other words, he was blackmailing me not to do anything unnecessary. It's your fault for being deceived. How pitiful to be thrown out with nothing, he laughed. But the one who would be thrown out without knowing anything was actually him. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. What's so funny all of a sudden? Robert asked, confused. I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge, I said, chuckling. What do you mean? I knew all along about your mistress. And I knew you never submitted our marriage registration. That's impossible. That's why I've been preparing, waiting for the day you bring it up yourself. Preparing to get my revenge on you. In truth, I had suspected my husband's infidelity for the past 6 months. But without solid evidence, I couldn't confront him. So, I decided to hire a private investigator to look into the matter. Ma'am, there are 2 things I need to tell you, the investigator had said. The first is that your husband is indeed having an affair. We've gathered evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. And the second, there's a possibility you two are not legally married. Not legally married. What does that mean? I had asked in shock. I overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe. He said they didn't need to worry about alimony or property division since they never submitted a marriage registration. What? I can't believe it. We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. I don't know why he didn't submit the marriage registration, but that's why he never let you handle any official procedures, the investigator had explained. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I can't believe this. How could this happen? It's rare to hear about someone not submitting a marriage registration for 10 years, but it's not unheard of. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? Not necessarily, the investigator said, a glimmer of hope in his voice. What do you mean? Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing. And so, I began my preparation with the investigator, ready to punish my husband for everything he'd done to me. So what if you knew we were never married from the start? It doesn't matter what I do with other women. I don't need to take any responsibility, Robert said, trying to brush off his actions. You said I was pitiful for not knowing anything, but it seems you're the one who's pitiful. What do you mean? We're considered to be in a common law relationship on paper. So what? He scoffed. You might not know, but you can actually claim alimony and divide property in a common law relationship. What? His confidence wavered for the first time. He didn't know that not registering as a legal marriage could backfire on him. Yes, you can make claims in a common law relationship. It's not well known, but it's possible. Of course, there are some conditions. Conditions? Robert asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. The common law relationship is established based on 2 criteria. First, both parties must have the intent to marry. If it's just living together, that's cohabitation. Mutual intent to marry is key. That seems subjective and hard to judge, he said, trying to dismiss it. For instance, if you had a wedding ceremony or were recognized as a couple by others, it can be acknowledged. We've had a wedding ceremony, and our parents and friends know us as a couple, Robert muttered. Then the first criterion is met. The second is living as if married. This includes sharing a household for over 3 years. You and I have been living together as a couple for over 10 years. As a homemaker, I've obviously shared the household finances. This is recognized as a marital relationship. So that means. It means if I can provide proof of what we've discussed, I can claim alimony and divide the property, I said calmly. I'm not an expert, so I've already consulted a lawyer. After meeting with the lawyer, I was told I could claim alimony and property division from my husband. I informed Robert of this, watching as his face turned pale. The confidence that had been so strong moments ago drained away. But even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman. Do you plan to rely on your parents after being kicked out? He snapped. Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month. I've also secured a new place to live. Don't worry about me, I replied, my voice calm but firm. He stared at me, speechless. You thought I, a clueless homemaker, would be helpless. But the tables have turned. I stood up and smiled coldly. And just so you know, I'll be discussing this with your parents. Do you not care what happens to your father? He threatened. If they break the contract, it'll ruin him. Let them, I said, unfazed. Sure, you were the link to the hospital, but the contract continued because of my father and his company's efforts. Whether or not they keep the contract is up to them. Let's see if the hospital will break a contract just because their doctor's 10-year marriage was a lie. Try telling them that. My father and I won't be affected if the contract is broken over this. In fact, it'll only show the depth of their trust. We'll just find another hospital to partner with, Robert said dismissively as I took out my phone. You're not calling your parents, are you? He asked, his voice suddenly panicked. That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married, so it's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending. To my surprise, my husband's demeanor changed. He began to apologize. Please, let me talk to them. Don't call. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, I'm done, he pleaded. I stared at him, incredulous. What does that have to do with me? Ha! You're asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict. Are you kidding? You could have refused the marriage from the start if you didn't intend to marry. Now, after 10 years of a selfish marriage, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story. But I can accept your story, I continued coldly. I'll make sure to tell both your parents and mine. And so, I called both sets of parents. All four were shocked upon hearing the truth, and a meeting was promptly arranged at our house. When everyone had gathered, Robert's father was the first to speak. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son. It's true. I didn't submit it, Robert admitted, his voice low. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you think about how Sophia would feel? His father demanded. I had no choice. No choice, you say. How can you even say that? It's actually your fault, Dad and Mom. I didn't want to get married, yet you started looking for a bride on your own, saying it was time I got married. You arranged meetings and tried to force a marriage on me. You're the one who agreed to the marriage, aren't you? His mother interjected. I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have made a fuss about it, so I decided to get married. If you were resolved to marry, why didn't you submit the marriage registration? His father pressed. I read about a man on the internet who was in the same situation, Robert began defensively. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived a married life without submitting the registration and then revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's appalling. And what happened to that man in the end? His father asked, disgusted. He's now married to the person he loves and has a real marriage. So, I too will marry my girlfriend and have a real marriage, Robert said confidently. At that moment, my parents, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. My father's voice was filled with anger and disappointment. A real marriage, huh? Sure, you might not have had a love marriage. But do you remember what you said at the wedding? We will never forget to care for each other and build a home full of smiles. What did those words mean to you? What were we shown that day? He paused, his eyes narrowing at Robert. We sent our daughter to you, hoping for her happiness, but you deceived her for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. Did you build a home full of smiles? Now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without a shred of care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? Robert stammered, well, that's... My father cut him off. I was happy you married our daughter, not just because you were a doctor. I thought she could build a happy home with someone as sincere as you, my father began, his voice heavy with disappointment. But it seems we were mistaken, deceived, even. And you threatened our daughter. If she told us the truth, you said you'd cut off the contract with our company. Seriously? Robert shifted uncomfortably, but my father's voice grew sharper. If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll cut off the contract ourselves. Be warned. And we'll tell the truth when asked why. Robert's face paled. If you do that, there will be rumors at the hospital, he stammered, panicking. Rumors? Well, yes, my father replied coldly. But that's the result of your actions. You were the one who threatened us with cutting off the contract. My husband was in complete panic now, his voice trembling. Please, wait. This is getting out of hand. Let's just talk. Don't mess with us, my father-in-law bellowed, grabbing Robert by the collar, his face flushed with rage. We didn't raise you to be such a scoundrel. What were you thinking? Father, please stop. Robert pleaded, his voice desperate. By not submitting the marriage registration, you might have thought you were doing yourself a favor, his father continued, his voice thunderous. But because of your selfish actions, Sophia was strung along for 10 years. What were you thinking, causing such trouble for others? The living room fell silent. Robert, faced with his father's fury, had nothing more to say. His usual arrogance was nowhere to be found. Sophia, and to your parents, my father-in-law began, his tone softening, I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot. No, you parents shouldn't apologize, my father responded. It's not your fault. However, Robert's father sighed, it's partly our responsibility as parents for letting him act this way. For now, we'll take him home and make sure he doesn't continue this reckless behavior. We'll deal with the aftermath properly. We're very sorry for all this. With that, Robert was taken away by his parents, back to his childhood home. You've been through a lot, my father said softly, turning to me. For now, you should come back home and rest. We'll think about what to do next later. You don't need to worry about anything right now. My parents looked at me with such kindness, their concern evident. Thank you, I said, smiling softly. But I won't go back home just yet. I still have things I need to do. I declined their offer and stayed in my own home. What I had to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband, gathering evidence for our common law relationship and preparing to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, a meeting with a lawyer was arranged. Robert, still defiant, couldn't hold back his frustration. Even if I agree to alimony, why should I divide my property, he spat. She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never working a day. All the furniture, clothes, food, I paid for everything. And now you're telling me I have to hand over the money. I worked hard for her. He ranted, unable to accept that his money would be shared with me. Yes, that's correct. The money you earned and the furniture are subject to property division. Why does it have to be like that? Who did the housework while you were working? Who cooked meals with the groceries you bought? That's irrelevant now. No, it's very relevant. A homemaker is entitled to property division because housework and childcare have economic value. Speaking as a human, not just a lawyer, do you think housework is something anyone can do, that it's just expected of a homemaker? The reason you could live freely is because of her support. Don't get that wrong. What? This situation is a result of your actions, yet you have the audacity to be selfish. What did you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of the assets for property division. That's how it is. It's just a short time, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she devoted herself to you, believing you were a married couple. You have no right to complain after betraying her. A perfect rebuttal. He couldn't say anything and reluctantly agreed to my demands. Then I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress. I knew who and where she was, thanks to the investigator. As he had said, she was a nurse working at the same hospital. The mistress, having heard from him that there was no possibility of alimony or property division, must have been utterly shocked by the contents of the claim. Wait a minute. This isn't what you told me. What do you want? I told you not to talk to me at the hospital. I got this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't married. What's this all about? I later learned that in a panic, after being served with the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. Okay, let's talk about this later. Not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this turns into a rumor. I don't care about that. I can't pay this kind of alimony. You said it was okay, so you should pay it for me. What? I won't pay a penny. You were the one who wanted this relationship. You said I was the only one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, quiet down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not in the wrong here. If you want to make amends with your wife, do it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her a penny, that you'll take care of everything. Wait, hold on. Hey. Hey. This exchange led to the revelation of their affair to the entire hospital. It quickly became the talk of the place. And then, the final blow came with my father's request to the hospital. I apologize, but we would like to terminate our contract at the end of next month, he said. The hospital, already aware of the rumors, hesitantly asked my father, "Excuse me for asking, but is the reason for canceling the contract related to Dr. Robert's affair?" It's already become a rumor. Yes, a nurse presumed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined this would happen, my father admitted. He had been pretending to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. I never expected it to turn out like this. You mean he never submitted the marriage registration? They asked, shocked. Weren't you aware? All we knew was that while being married, he had an affair, my father explained. What do you mean he didn't submit the marriage registration? With my father's request, it was revealed that Dr. Robert had been deceiving me for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. This news quickly spread among the other nurses. Dr. Robert deceived his wife for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration, and he had an affair with a nurse. How low can you go? How could he do that? They whispered. Can someone really not notice for 10 years? Apparently, Sophia's maiden name was the same, and he managed all the official paperwork. That's scary, another nurse added. The rumors didn't just stay within the hospital staff. They spread to the patients, and soon both Robert and his mistress were receiving cold stares. Unable to endure the shame, they both resigned from the hospital. As my father later told me, did you manage to get the alimony? Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress. She refused to pay until the end, claiming she was deceived, but the lawyer made it clear her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about the contract? Was it cancelled after all? He asked. No, that's off the table. He resigned, and since our company is trusted, the hospital asked us not to cancel the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. After that, I started a new life in a new place and was living happily. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband contacted me. Is it true you got remarried? He asked. I had indeed married a man I met at work, and somehow, he had found out. I wonder whose number this is, I said, puzzled. Going through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes or no? Did you get married? He demanded. Yes, I got married, I replied calmly. You betrayed me, he spat. Betray? We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you, right? I responded. That's a different matter, he fumed. Indeed, things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you. Is that why you contacted me? I asked. After I said this, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he taunted, of course, you're still unmarried, since you probably haven't submitted a marriage registration. You're that kind of woman. But things weren't as he imagined. Unfortunately for you, my husband isn't the kind of person to do such terrible things. He knows all about your story, so to ensure I wouldn't feel anxious, we went to the office together to submit the registration. Sadly for you, things aren't as you thought. I could hear his frustration, but I added, I can somewhat understand your wish for me to be unhappy, considering your own misery, but sorry, we're happily married. With that, I hung up the phone. What kind of life he leads now, I don't know. But unless he changes his selfish nature, it's unlikely he'll ever find happiness.
I never thought my world would crumble in the dead of night, in our own garage. The scene before me was like a twisted nightmare. There, entangled in the backseat of our family car, were Ethan and Grace, my husband and sister. The pain of betrayal struck me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. My name is Ava Carter, a 28-year-old nurse, married to the man I thought was the love of my life. Ethan was my high school classmate, someone I barely knew back then, but when he re-entered my life years later, he came as a whirlwind romance that I naively believed was fate. Our love is real, Ava, Ethan's words echoed in my mind, now a cruel joke in the face of his betrayal. Our love story began innocently enough. Ethan approached me after graduation, his charm and attentiveness sweeping me off my feet. He was the popular guy in school, the kind that every girl dreamed of. But me? I was just Ava, the quiet one. His interest in me was baffling, yet intoxicating. Why me? I had asked him once, my insecurities surfacing. Because I fell in love, he replied, his gaze holding mine, convincing and sincere. Or so I thought. The doubt I carried was partly due to my sister, Grace. Beautiful, outgoing, and the polar opposite of me. She was the one who always shone, effortlessly attracting attention. When I turned to her for advice about Ethan, her words were encouraging, yet somehow patronizing. He's serious about you. Who would chase a girl for months for a fling? She had said, her words tinted with a hint of condescension. I wanted to believe her, to believe that someone could truly love me for me. Ethan's kindness in our first year together only solidified my trust. He was the perfect boyfriend, showering me with attention and surprises. Every anniversary, every birthday was a celebration of our love. But after we got married, everything changed. Can't you at least help with the cleaning? It's your house, too, I pleaded with Ethan on countless occasions. He earned less than me, spending most of his time idly while I worked exhausting shifts at the hospital. But he shrugged off my requests, his once sweet words turning into sharp retorts. You're the one who's good at it, he'd say, his voice laced with annoyance. The emotional toll was immense. My once fairy tale romance had turned into a draining, one-sided relationship. Ethan's transformation from a loving partner to a freeloader was gradual but relentless. The worst part? I started believing that maybe it was my fault, that maybe I wasn't enough. That night, the night I caught them, was supposed to be like any other. I woke up to find Ethan's side of the bed cold and empty. A sense of unease led me to the garage, where I heard them before I saw them. The sight of Ethan and Grace together shattered any illusions I had left. Be gentle, Ethan, Grace's voice was a whisper, but to me it was a scream that tore through my heart. I stood there, frozen, as the truth revealed itself in the most horrifying way. They didn't see me. They were too lost in their own world of deceit. I closed the garage quietly, locking them in their den of betrayal. Rushing to my parents' house, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief. My parents and Mark, Grace's unsuspecting husband, were waiting, their expressions grim. Mark held a recording device in his hand, and the voices of Ethan and Grace filled the room, discussing their affair with a casual cruelty that made my skin crawl. I knew then what I had to do. Revenge was the only path left for me. I wanted them to feel the pain they inflicted, to understand the depth of their betrayal, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. Let's make them pay, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, and so the plan for retribution began. As the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, my resolve hardened. The man I had loved, Ethan, was nothing but a mask, and Grace, my sister, a serpent in disguise. I replayed their secret conversations, each word a dagger to my heart. You're just too good at this, Ethan. Grace's voice from the recording mocked me. Ethan's laughter followed. Only for you, Grace. The memories of our relationship, once sweet, now turned bitter. Ethan and I had started as friends, and his pursuit seemed so genuine. He was the popular one, the golden boy, while I remained in the background, unnoticed. His sudden interest in me was like a dream come true. I was flattered, overwhelmed, and eventually in love. "Why me?" I had asked him more than once. "Because you're different, Ava. You're real," Ethan had said, looking into my eyes with such intensity that I believed him. That belief was my downfall. But Grace, she was the epitome of confidence and allure. She had always been the center of attention, effortlessly stealing the spotlight. When Ethan came into my life, her advice was laced with subtle jabs, undermining my self-esteem while pretending to be supportive. "Take a chance, Ava. Ethan seems different," she urged, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I remembered how Ethan's behavior started changing after our marriage. The sweet gestures and thoughtful surprises became rarer, replaced by indifference and neglect. I was left to manage everything, from household chores to finances, while Ethan lounged around, his job at his father's company more of a time pass than a career. "We need to support each other, Ethan. Can't you see I'm struggling?" I had pleaded with him countless times. "You knew I wasn't the domestic type," was his cold reply. My efforts to involve him in our life were met with resistance and anger. His once loving words turned into harsh criticisms, his hands, once gentle, now raised in threat. I remembered the fear, the sense of walking on eggshells around my own husband. "You're better off doing it yourself. You don't want me to mess it up, do you?" Ethan's words were a constant reminder of my supposed inadequacy. The realization that it was all a charade to get close to Grace hit me like a tidal wave. Their affair wasn't just a fleeting moment of weakness. It was planned, nurtured in deceit. They used my love, my trust, as a stepping stone for their sordid affair. Grace's words from the recording played in my mind. "I've always admired how easily you manipulate, Ethan." His response was a chilling confession. "And I admire your ability to play the innocent sister." The plan for revenge took shape in my mind, clear and precise. I couldn't let them get away with their treachery. They needed to understand the pain they had caused, the lives they had shattered. It was time for their facade of love to come crashing down. "I will make them regret every lie, every deceit," I whispered to myself, a vow that I intended to keep. The morning light did nothing to ease the storm inside me. As I sat with Mark, my parents, and the recording, a plan began to take shape. It was more than just a need for revenge. It was a quest for justice, for exposing the lies that Ethan and Grace had woven so skillfully. "Did you know about this, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I had my suspicions," Mark confessed, his eyes dark with pain, "but I never imagined the depth of their betrayal." My parents, always supportive, looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We're here for you, Ava, whatever you need," my father said, his voice firm. It was a surreal moment, hearing the supportive words of my family while grappling with the betrayal of those I had loved. Ethan's true nature was a bitter pill to swallow. He was no longer the man I married, but a stranger with a charming facade. Our anniversary, it was all a lie, wasn't it? The words tumbled out of me, a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "He never cared about the marriage, Ava. It was all a game to him." Mark's voice was heavy with unspoken emotions. The conversation shifted to the specifics of our revenge. It had to be meticulous, leaving no room for Ethan and Grace to escape the consequences of their actions. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Financially and socially," Mark added, his mind already strategizing. The plan was simple yet effective. We would use the evidence of the affair to ruin their reputation. Ethan's job at his father's company would be the first target. With the recording and my testimony, it would be easy to convince his father of Ethan's true character. "Grace won't get away with this either," I said, a cold determination settling over me. Mark nodded. "I'll file for divorce and make sure she doesn't get a penny." The thought of confronting them was both terrifying and exhilarating. I wanted to see the shock on their faces when they realized their world was crumbling. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they had caused me. "Let's do it. Let's bring them down," I declared, my voice filled with a newfound strength. My parents agreed, their support unwavering. "We'll stand by you, Ava, always," my mother said, her eyes glistening with tears. The meeting ended with a plan in place. It was time for Ethan and Grace to face the consequences of their actions. They thought they could use me and get away with it. They were wrong. I would make sure of that. The day unfolded with a tense anticipation. I waited for the moment when Ethan and Grace would realize their carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse. My heart raced with a mix of fear and vindictive satisfaction. In the late afternoon, the confrontation took place. Ethan and Grace, looking disheveled and confused after being released from the garage, were summoned to my parents' house. They walked in, not knowing that their lives were about to change irrevocably. "What the hell, Ava? Why did you lock us in there?" Ethan's voice was filled with anger and confusion. Grace added, her voice dripping with feigned innocence, "Ava, we were worried sick about you. Why did you run off like that?" Their acting was almost convincing, but I knew better. "You're worried about me? That's rich, coming from you two," I replied, my voice cold and unwavering. Mark stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We know about the affair. All of it." Ethan and Grace exchanged a panicked look, their masks of concern quickly dissolving. "You have no proof," Ethan blurted out, his voice betraying his fear. "That's where you're wrong," Mark said, pulling out the recording device. The voices of Ethan and Grace filled the room, their intimate conversation echoing off the walls. The color drained from their faces as they listened to their own words, their affair laid bare for all to hear. This is illegal. You can't record us like that." Grace stammered, her composure shattered. I stepped closer, my anger boiling over. "You think that matters now, after everything you've done? You used me, Ethan. You used our marriage to get to my sister. And you, Grace, how could you do this to me? To Mark?" My voice was a mixture of rage and heartache. Ethan's defiance crumbled, replaced by a desperate plea. "Ava, please, I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." "And you, Grace? What's your excuse?" I demanded, my gaze fixed on her. Grace's eyes darted around the room, seeking an ally, finding none. "It was a mistake, Ava. I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake? You call an ongoing affair a mistake?" My words were sharp, cutting through the room. Mark intervened, his voice calm but firm. "The marriage is over, Grace. I've already filed for divorce. And as for you, Ethan, your father will know about this. I doubt he'll want a son-in-law who cheats on his daughter with her own sister." Ethan's face went pale, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. Grace began to sob, her tears failing to elicit sympathy from anyone in the room. "You two deserve each other," I said, the finality in my voice marking the end of the chapter that had been Ethan and Grace in my life. As they left, their pleas and cries echoing behind them, I felt a sense of closure. The path ahead would be challenging, but at least it would be free from their deceit. The revenge was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Ethan and Grace had left, their facades of innocence shattered. But it wasn't enough. The depth of their betrayal demanded more than just a revelation. It required retribution. Sitting around the dining table with Mark and my parents, we plotted our next moves. The air was thick with a sense of righteous anger, a collective desire to see justice served. "We need to ensure they truly understand the consequences of their actions," Mark said, his voice resolute. I nodded in agreement. "They can't just walk away from this unscathed." My father, usually a man of few words, spoke up. "Ethan's employment at his father's company is his lifeline. If he loses that, he loses everything." A plan began to form, one that involved not just exposing Ethan's infidelity to his family, but also highlighting his manipulative nature. His father, a respected businessman, would not tolerate such a scandal. "And what about Grace?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with disappointment and disgust for her own daughter. "Her social standing, her lifestyle, it all hinges on her marriage to Mark," I said. "Once the divorce is finalized and the details of her infidelity become public, she'll lose it all." Mark nodded. "I'll make sure the divorce settlement leaves her with nothing. She won't be able to charm her way out of this." The conversation turned to the logistics of our plan. Mark had contacts who could expedite the divorce and ensure the affair was made public. My father knew people in the business community who would ensure Ethan's disgrace was well known. It was a meticulous plan, cold and calculated, but it was justified. Ethan and Grace had played with our lives, and now they would face the repercussions. "Are you sure about this, Ava?" my mother asked, concern in her eyes. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "They need to learn that actions have consequences. They can't just use people and expect to get away with it." As we finalized our plan, I felt a sense of empowerment. For too long, I had been the victim of their deceit, but now I was taking control. Ethan and Grace would soon learn the true cost of their betrayal, and I would be there to witness their fall. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as our plan was set into motion. Mark, with his connections, expedited the divorce proceedings and ensured that the details of Grace's infidelity became public knowledge. The reaction was immediate and scathing. Grace, once a social butterfly, found herself ostracized, her friends turning their backs on her in disgust. Meanwhile, my father used his influence to spread the word about Ethan's behavior. Soon enough, the scandal reached his father's ears. The disappointment and anger in his father's voice were palpable when he called Ethan for a meeting. "I cannot believe you would stoop so low, Ethan," his father had said, according to what I heard later. "You have not only shamed yourself, but our entire family." Ethan's pleas fell on deaf ears. His father, a man of principles, could not overlook such a grave transgression. Ethan was promptly removed from his position in the company, his future in tatters. As for Grace, the reality of her situation hit her hard. The luxurious life she had enjoyed was slipping through her fingers like sand. Her husband, whom she had deceived, was now her ex-husband, and he made sure she left the marriage with nothing but her personal belongings. The day of reckoning came when I encountered Ethan and Grace together, looking defeated and desperate. They had come, hoping for some form of forgiveness, a chance to explain themselves. "Ava, please, you have to understand," Ethan began, his voice trembling. "You don't get to ask for understanding, Ethan. Not after everything you've done." I cut him off, my voice cold and unyielding. Grace was next, her eyes brimming with tears. "Ava, I'm your sister. Please, can't we just talk about this?" "You ceased to be my sister the moment you betrayed me," I said, the finality in my voice leaving no room for argument. They tried to plead, to reason, but it was useless. The damage was done, their actions irredeemable. They had played a dangerous game and lost everything. "You both made your choices, and now you have to live with them," I said, turning away from their pleas. As I walked away, leaving them behind, I felt a sense of closure. The weight of their betrayal would no longer hold me down. They had received their due punishment, and I could finally move on. Ethan and Grace had thought they could manipulate those around them without consequence. But they were wrong. They learned the hard way that deceit and treachery come at a price they would now pay for the rest of their lives. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle. Ethan and Grace, now pariahs, faced the harsh reality of their choices. Their fall from grace was a tale whispered in hushed tones among our acquaintances, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal and deceit. Meanwhile, I found myself in a period of reflection. The intense emotions that had fueled my desire for revenge gave way to a quiet introspection. I had sought justice, and in many ways I had achieved it. Yet the victory was bittersweet. There was no joy in seeing the downfall of people I once loved, only a profound sense of loss and a desire to move forward. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of purpose it brought. My colleagues noticed the change in me, a newfound strength and resilience that had emerged from the ashes of my old life. One day, after a particularly grueling shift, I sat down with a close friend and coworker, Lisa, who had been a pillar of support through everything. "You look different, Ava. Stronger," she commented, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and admiration. "I had to be," I replied, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "I couldn't let them destroy me." Lisa nodded, understanding. "And now, what's next for Ava Carter?" I smiled, a genuine smile that had been absent for too long. "I start living for myself. I rebuild, but this time on my own terms." The path to healing wasn't straightforward. There were days when anger and sadness threatened to overwhelm me, but with each passing day they became less potent. I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had lost in my marriage, my independence, my strength, and my capacity for joy. Months passed, and life found a new rhythm. Ethan and Grace became distant memories, occasional whispers in the wind that no longer had the power to hurt me. My relationship with my parents and Mark grew stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. We had faced a storm together, and it had brought us closer. As for love, I was cautious. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they were healing. I knew that someday I would be ready to open my heart again, but for now, I was content in finding peace within myself. Sitting in the park one sunny afternoon, watching the world go by, I realized that I had come a long way. The journey had been painful, filled with trials and tribulations, but it had led me to a place of understanding and acceptance. I had learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, was not a path to true happiness. True strength lay in forgiveness, in the ability to let go of the past and embrace the future. As I looked up at the clear blue sky, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that the best was yet to come. The past could not be changed, but the future was mine to write. And with that thought, I stood up, ready to face whatever life had in store for me, with a heart that was healing and a spirit that was unbroken.
You got your best friend pregnant. I wonder what he's talking about. A sense of detachment, as though it's someone else's problem, wells up inside me. But the reality hits me with the words Ella utters right in front of me. Well, that's the situation. So you're going to divorce Harry, right? Yvonne can't believe it. Pregnant with Ella. When I ask back, Ella smirks and continues with a mocking look. You figured it out, right? I'm taking your husband. So get out, gladly I reply, with a smile. Ella is really clueless. Does she think I knew nothing? Of course, that's not the case. I've known about their affair for quite a while. I just didn't confront them until I was ready. But now this saves me the trouble. They've basically confessed to cheating on me, so I'll return the affair with interest. Brace yourselves, smiling, I head to the front door. My name is Yvonne Kirby. I'm a 34-year-old housewife working part-time. I head to the front door. At a supermarket, my husband Harry works at a car dealership for a well-known manufacturer. I think his salary is decent, but that doesn't mean we're rolling in dough. He needs to look sharp for work, and our daughter Elsie wants to attend a private middle school. She's just started 4th grade but will need more money for her exams. That's why I work part-time, to help out with finances. Ideally, I'd work full-time, but it's not that simple. The first issue is taking care of my mother-in-law. She lives alone, has mobility issues, and is elderly. She gets a pension, but my care and support are essential. The only silver lining is the house my late father-in-law built nearby. She lives there alone, having refused to move in with us to stay in her house full of memories. The second issue is Harry's job. He's always busy, leaving all the household chores to me. If I worked full-time, the housework would just pile up. Staying the course is the most realistic option, isn't it? I just can't take that final step. That's my current situation. But I knew from before we got married that I would be doing the household chores alone and that my mother-in-law would need care. So I'm not unhappy with how things are. But there's one thing I regret, becoming friends with Ella, who introduced me to Harry. Ella and I met in college. Back then, I was pretty plain. Ella, on the other hand, was popular and quite noticeable. Sure, Ella looked good and had a likable personality, but that was just a facade. The real Ella was the worst, however. I often hung out with Ella. I didn't realize this until much later. Unaware, I often hung out with Ella. Yvonne, you got something on your mind. Ella would pat my shoulder lightly. I answered a bit shyly, I'm stuck on a report due next week. Is that all? I'm here for you. Let's work on it together. But hanging out with someone plain like me, won't people start looking at you funny? Ella. I glanced around and felt the weight of people's stares, their curiosity evident as to why Ella was in the company of someone as unremarkable as me. I turned away. What are you talking about? You and I have been best friends since we enrolled. Ella's words caused a stir around us. She cast a stern look at the onlookers. What, is it weird that Aone and I are best friends? I noticed a student shaking their head with a wry smile. Witnessing this, Ella drew me close and declared, "We're total opposites, but we're best friends. Everyone, be nice to Aone, all right?" "Got it," I heard someone say slowly. I began to be accepted, all thanks to Ella's scheme. Ella frequently employed the phrase, "I'll do it for you," whether it was, "I'll hang out with you," or "I'll wait for you." It subtly implied that my abilities were only viable because of her, insinuating my own naivety. Consequently, I started to believe that I could only accomplish things with Ella's assistance, attributing all success to her. In retrospect, it was a fallacy. I had been led to believe I wasn't competent enough. Unaware of this manipulation, I spent my college years overly reliant on Ella. Thus, when Ella requested a favor, I readily acquiesced. "You're taking the car dealership's recruitment interview. I had my eye on that place too. Can you give it up for me?" Ella implored. But I began to protest. "Come on, Aone. We're friends, aren't we?" Constantly comparing myself to Ella, I always felt inferior. Despite having similar grades, she excelled in personality and appearance. I felt I stood no chance if we both pursued the same opportunities. These insecurities made me yield easily. "Then maybe I'll go for banking," I conceded. "That's a good idea. You're more suited to be a hard-working bank employee, Aone," Ella affirmed. Ultimately, Ella secured the job at the car dealership, and I settled for a position in a bank. At the time, I didn't perceive it as part of Ella's plan. Rather, I deemed myself fortunate to have obtained a stable job by sacrificing the dealership position for her. Shortly after, Ella approached me with a proposition. "I've got someone I want to introduce you to, Aone. Harry is my coworker. I think he's perfect for you. Why not give it a try? I'm sure about it. Let's meet him." Trusting Ella's judgment implicitly, I agreed. Following her introduction, I met Harry. We began dating, and during one of our outings, Harry confided, "Ivone, you're such a good person. I'd like to marry someone like you." "Me?" I asked, taken aback. "But I can't ask you to marry me," Harry sighed. Curious, I inquired about his reservations, prompting Harry to disclose his familial obligations. His mother's mobility issues meant that his future spouse would need to assume caregiving responsibilities. This uncertainty clouded his decision to marry. "It's okay. I don't mind at all. I'm occupied with work, and you'd handle the household chores." "Are you sure?" I reassured him. "Yes, I'm sure. Leave it to me." Genuinely in love with Harry, I saw no issue with his circumstances. Thus, I agreed to marry him. However, my trust was soon shattered. Years into our marriage, while picking up Elsie from kindergarten, Daisy, usually a jovial fellow mom, approached me with a solemn expression. "Hey, can we talk for a bit?" "Do you have time now?" she asked. "Sure, I'm off from work today, so I have a bit of time." Between housework and caring for my mother-in-law, engaging with other moms is important as Elsie's mother, so I followed Daisy to a nearby cafe, as she suggested. Once we ordered, Daisy began to talk. "You see, I saw something." Our kids started eating their cakes, and Daisy shared her story. She had been going to a gym near the station for her diet. A few days ago, she saw Harry there. Daisy had met Harry at the kindergarten before, so she recognized him right away. But that's where the problem started. Harry was with an unknown woman, looking quite intimate. Daisy asked me with a stern face, "Isn't that cheating?" "Cheating? No way, that can't be," I replied, trying to hide my agitation. Daisy put her hand on mine as I gripped my cup tightly. "Why don't we check it out secretly? If it's cheating, we might get some evidence." The idea of checking scared me, but I couldn't just ignore the possibility of infidelity. After some thought, I agreed to accompany Daisy to the gym. On the day, I left Elsie with my mother-in-law and met Daisy in the neighborhood. We headed to the gym together. We entered the gym as trial members. Soon, Harry arrived at the gym, but he was alone. No woman, no colleagues, no friends. Daisy's just jumping to conclusions, I thought, relieved. Then a familiar voice caught my attention. Sorry, I got a bit delayed. That voice, it's Ella. My heart skipped a beat. What were you up to? Had a troublesome customer kept making a fuss. Their cheerful conversation continued. Watching them, my heart ached. Feeling betrayed was the strongest emotion, followed by the shock that Ella, who was supposed to be my best friend, was involved. I took some photos. Is it okay? Daisy's voice brought me back. I nodded, but honestly, I was far from okay. My mind went blank. I don't remember much after that. According to Daisy, who filled me in later, the two left the gym and went to Ella's place. Apparently, I followed them with Daisy and even took photos of them entering the room. I don't remember it, but the evidence was clearly on my phone. With the evidence, it'd be better to divorce, Daisy advised me. But rushing into a divorce wasn't wise. Elsie is young, and I couldn't live on my part-time job alone. Just a little patience, just a bit more, and then I'll divorce him. From that day, I had a new goal in my life, to stabilize my living situation and secure a steady income to save up little by little, so I'd be ready for a divorce whenever it came. I focused on these two things, yet my heart wasn't calm. Every time Harry came home with a nonchalant face, I felt boiling anger inside. But somewhere in my heart, I still wanted to believe in Harry. So occasionally, I asked him things like this, Harry, why don't you take Elsie out sometime? I can't do that, you know. Being at the car dealership, my busiest times are when everyone else is off. He seemed like he didn't want to deal with our daughter. Child rearing was my job, like he was saying that. I just nodded, okay, I see. How about visiting your mom on your days off? I don't really have anything to talk about with my mom. But you can't even take care of her, usually, taking care of her is your job. Not mine. She's not a kid, so I'll stay out of it. Harry's tone grew stern, seemingly irritated. I closed my mouth, feeling dejected. It seemed like Harry had lost his affection, not just for me but for Elsie and my mother-in-law as well. I felt disappointed, yet somewhere relieved, believe no more attachments. Those words floated in my mind. The following years were truly hellish. Living with Harry was just cohabitation. We barely spoke, and our interactions were minimal. Plus, as Elsie grew older, she started to despise Harry. I don't even need a dad like him, she would say things like that. One day, Harry had to go to the manufacturer's headquarters for work. Perfect timing, I thought, and headed to my mother-in-law's house with Elsie. During Harry's business trip, Elsie and I stayed at her grandmother's house. But the next day, I got a strange call from Harry, who was supposed to be away. You're not home. Where are you? He asked abruptly. I'm at your mom's. What about your business trip? I inquired. Just get back home right now, he said bluntly, then hung up. Puzzled, I headed home. Entering the house, I heard the TV in the living room. Harry, did something happen on your trip? I asked as I opened the living room door. At that moment, I saw Harry talking with Ella. But as soon as he noticed me, Harry pulled away from her, then he got down on his knees. I got your best friend pregnant, he blurted out. What is he talking about? I thought, feeling detached, like it was someone else's issue. But reality struck with the words Ella blurted out right in front of me. Well, that's how it is. So, you're going to divorce Harry, right, Yvonne? You're pregnant. Ella, my best friend, smirked and continued with a mocking look, you figured it out, right? I'm taking your husband, so get out. Gladly, I replied with a smile and turned on my heel. Ella really is clueless, does she think I knew nothing about it? Of course, that's not true. I've known about you two for quite some time. I just didn't confront you until I was ready. But now you've made it easier for me by confessing to your affair. Well then, prepare yourselves because I'm going to return everything you've done to me with interest, I said to myself, smiling as I headed for the front door. Harry yelled as if trying to stop me, you realize talking about divorce, right? Are you sure you understand that? I understand perfectly. You think you can make it on just your part-time income after we divorce? Harry sneered. I sighed, then Harry, in his arrogant manner, offered, if you're really desperate, I might hire you to take care of my mom. That suits you perfectly, taking care of the elderly. Harry and Ella burst into laughter. Seeing them, I sighed again. Ella, you finally showed your true colors, huh? What are you talking about? Ella feigned ignorance. I snorted and continued, pretending to be my friend, introducing me to Harry. It was all just to use me conveniently, wasn't it? Oh, you knew, boring Ella pouted. Yes, I realized your true nature when I found out about your affair with Harry. I showed them the evidence, photos of their affair. What the heck is that? Ella rushed over and stared at the phone screen. When she realized the photos were of them, she glared at me sharply. How long have you known? What, about 5 years? Don't joke with me. Ella raised her voice. I answered calmly, I was preparing for life after the divorce. I thought I'd be told I couldn't make it on my part-time income. I smiled at Harry, as if saying, just as I expected. Harry seemed infuriated by my attitude and suddenly started making a scene. Well then, get out as soon as you can. I'll send your stuff wherever you want. No need for that, most of my things are already at your mom's place. What? At my mom's? Harry's face changed color. I continued, trying to suppress a laugh. Didn't you notice that your wife's and family's belongings have been gradually disappearing? That's, pathetic, in more ways than one, I snorted. Harry, clearly agitated, raised his voice, enough, then. There's no more to talk about. I'll be claiming alimony later. I'll give you the divorce papers. Then do whatever you want. Just be prepared, the cost of cheating isn't cheap. I looked back and forth between Harry and Ella, then left the house, heading straight to my in-laws' place. Elsie was preparing dinner when I arrived. Welcome back. What was it, Mom? Actually, I hesitated. Elsie, is it about the divorce? If so, I'm all for it. Aren't you, Elsie? Shocked, Elsie said, I don't need a dad like him. That's Elsie's catchphrase, so she was actually supporting the divorce. I finally realized how she felt. Elsie, I'm sorry I've caused you trouble. I'm fine. But Grandma, Elsie glanced at my mother-in-law, realizing, I turned to her. Mom, it's okay. It's Harry's fault, isn't it? Well, yes, but... I averted my gaze. Then, my mother-in-law patted my head. So, you moved things along because you saw this coming. Yes, but what about you, Mom? It's fine. I've made up my mind too, my mother-in-law smiled warmly. I felt a sense of relief, and at the same time, tears started to flow. I had actually been encouraging her to consider moving into a care facility. It wasn't that I didn't want to take care of her, it was to ensure she wouldn't be in trouble when I got divorced. So, I was glad she was positive about moving into the facility. We had already been making progress with the arrangements, all that was left was to get her consent. Then I'll proceed with the care facility arrangements, please do, my mother-in-law nodded firmly. The next day, I began handling various procedures, looking for a new place, finding a lawyer. There was so much to do, especially finding a house for Elsie and me. Comfort was key. I visited several real estate agents. 3 days later, as I left a real estate office, my phone started ringing. Hello. The moment I answered, a loud voice blasted through. How many times do you think I've called you, Ella? I instinctively pulled the phone away and murmured, yes, it's me, Ella. Where are you? At a real estate office. Why? As I asked, Ella's voice got even louder. Real estate. Looking for a house with stolen money, are you? Stolen? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. The passbook Harry gave me was empty. I tried to calm my breathing. I revealed the truth, the account was empty from the start. We were always struggling financially. Don't lie, Harry's company pays well. There's no way you had financial troubles, Ella's loud voice hurt my ear. I brought the phone back to my face and continued, well, no matter how good the salary, supporting a lover as well would naturally drain it. What do you mean? You still don't get it. That's why I patiently explained it to her. Actually, Harry had been splitting his salary into 2 parts, one for supporting our family and the other for spending on Ella. It looked like about 70% was for us, and the rest was used for Ella. I found out about this after I discovered their affair. Wanting more evidence, I hired a professional to investigate. That's when the salary issue came to light. When I told Ella this, she raised her voice in disbelief. What? You lived on 70% of his salary. That's impossible, stop lying. That's why I was working part-time. But that's... Ella stuttered. I pressed on, so, there's no money left. But you must have some, give it to me. Then, her audacity was astonishing, but I couldn't just let it slide. I only have what I earned myself. If you have a problem, I'll add it to the alimony. Add to it? Yes, the alimony I'll demand from you as the mistress. I was thinking of the usual amount, but since you're complaining. I was cut off as the phone call abruptly ended. After that, Ella didn't answer any of my calls. She must be reflecting, I thought, but it seemed not. The next day, Ella called again. As soon as I answered, she started yelling, where did you hide her? You don't answer my calls, and now what are you talking about? That woman, where did you put her? Who was she talking about? Surely not Elsie. What did she mean? As I pondered, Ella couldn't hold back and shouted, Harry's mother. She's got money, right? She's not at home, where did you hide her? Oh, you mean Mom, where is she? Tell me. Ella seemed quite desperate, realizing she was planning to ask my mother-in-law for money. I firmly refused, sorry, but I won't tell you. Why not? She's got money, right? If not, sell the in-laws' house. Ella's greed was on full display. She talked about taking my mother-in-law's money or failing that, selling her house to get the cash. She repeated this several times. Sighing, I asked Ella, you sure you want to discuss this with me? Doesn't matter. Once the divorce papers are in, you're just a stranger. That might be true, but what if I told my mother-in-law about her plans? Ella seemed unable to even consider that possibility. Had they been squandering that much money? I was baffled, but then I reconsidered. It's too much trouble. So, I'll tell you about my mother-in-law. You should have confessed from the start. Where is she? In a senior care facility. The address is... I gave Ella the address I had noted down. Ella began to laugh. I'll go there right away and start the process to sell the house. That's impossible. Why are you upset? No, it's just that the house doesn't exist anymore. As I said this, Ella's laughter abruptly stopped. After a pause, she cautiously asked me, "What do you mean my mother-in-law sold the house?" The money was used for her care facility. Sold it, I recalled. When I first suggested the care facility to my mother-in-law, she initially refused, citing the lack of funds for admission. That's when I proposed selling the house. She hesitated but eventually decided to sell. We didn't want Harry to catch on to our plans until I brought up divorce, so she continued living in the house, paying rent, until our divorce discussion started. And now here we are. So, she doesn't have any money left. That's right. This is your fault. Don't forget this. With a scream that sounded like the death throes, Ella hung up the phone. Anyway, she must have given up by now. Let those two do whatever they want. While thinking this, I methodically proceeded with the divorce procedures. First, I hired a lawyer to claim alimony. I was sure they would resist, but surprisingly, they accepted the amount suggested by the lawyer. Later, I received the alimony through the lawyer. At the same time, I signed the divorce papers and had them delivered to Harry. Harry apparently signed them readily, and I successfully completed the divorce. It took 3 months to finalize everything. It was tough, but I'm glad I persevered. Relieved, I went to thank my lawyer. That's when I was handed something unexpected, a wedding celebration party. It was an invitation to a wedding party. Ella, not knowing my home address, had left it with the lawyer. Was she inviting me to gloat as the woman whose husband was taken away? I was about to tear it up right there, but then I had a second thought. Harry's associates would surely be at the party. Maybe I could do something. I contacted a certain person. Sure enough, they had also received an invitation. So, I decided to attend the wedding party. The venue was a hotel's banquet hall. It was called a party, but it was essentially a wedding reception. They really went all out despite having no money. As I was thinking this, a voice came from behind, "Thank you for coming." I turned around to see Ella in a dress, with Harry beside her. "If you're going to do this, you might as well have had a wedding." "Sorry, I can't wear a wedding dress because I'm pregnant." Ella was clearly heavily pregnant. She was willing to go this far just to humiliate me. I responded, looking away, "Oh, right. But I'm glad you came." "I thought you wouldn't." Ella made a show of pretending to cry. "Don't cry now," I said, knowing full well. I looked around, noticing people quickly avert their eyes. Ella must have said something convenient for her. The atmosphere felt oddly cold. If that's how they want to play it, I'm ready to go all out. A fire ignited in my heart. Pretending to console Ella, I scanned the room for someone. Soon, I found the person I was looking for. "Oh, sorry. I see someone I know," I said quickly, excusing myself. For some reason, Ella followed me. But I expected this. She would want to make a spectacle of me, I thought. So, with that in mind, I decided to leave the place. I approached the person from behind. "Sorry to keep you waiting." The person turned around at my voice. It was Daisy. "Oh, you're already here." "Yes, just greeted my ex-husband and his new friend," as I gestured towards them. Harry suddenly became flustered. He awkwardly bowed to Daisy. Thank you for coming today. But why is Ione's friend here?" "I'm accompanying my husband, you know." "I don't think you've met him yet." Daisy smiled and pulled the arm of a man standing beside her. Harry's face went pale. Daisy introduced her husband to Harry. "This is my husband, Ted. He owns a local supermarket and is a customer of your company, Mr. Scott's." Harry looked away, embarrassed. Daisy's husband was a VIP customer of Harry's company. He bought not only his own car but also Daisy's car from Harry's dealership. He even referred his supermarket employees to Harry's company. In other words, he was a very important customer to Harry. It's no wonder Harry was panicking amidst this. Daisy introduced me to her husband. This is my friend, Yvonne. We're partners in an investment company. As Daisy said this, Ella's face changed color. Investment company. What's that? Exactly what it sounds like. Harry's salary wasn't enough, so I've always been investing, and it grew into this. This happened right after I discovered Harry and Ella's affair. I realized I needed a stable income for the divorce. That's when I turned to investing, something I started after getting married. Being a former banker, I had some knowledge about investments. Increasing my investment amount turned out to be a huge hit. Before I knew it, I had a stable income. I told Daisy about it, and she became interested. We started investing together, and soon other mom friends caught wind of it. Then we thought, why not start a company? So we did, and that's how we started our business. So, after the divorce, I started working at the investment company. I have a good income now, and I'm glad I got divorced. What do you mean? How about you? Did you manage to get the money? Ella looked away, obviously upset. I continued with a smile. Well, you must be in a tougher financial situation now, huh? Because Harry is in such a state, right? I pointed to where Harry was kneeling. Apparently, he had been scolded by Daisy's husband. I'm sorry my affair caused all this. I'll be honest from now on. Please continue doing business with us. Harry was desperately apologizing, but Daisy's husband ignored him. In the end, Harry was left in the lurch. After losing an important client, he became an outcast at work, talked about behind his back by bosses and colleagues. Unable to bear such a life, Harry resigned. Meanwhile, pregnant Ella pressed Harry for a divorce, but being pregnant, she couldn't work. Reluctantly, she decided to divorce. After giving birth, they are currently in the midst of a messy divorce trial. To cover the costs of the trial, Harry works at a construction site, while Ella works at a nightclub. They both toil tirelessly, each trying to discredit the other in court. I heard all this from my mother-in-law, whom I still visit after the divorce. Elsie is her granddaughter, after all. Elsie is preparing for her middle school entrance exams next year. Mom, is it okay if I go to a private school? Do we have enough money? Of course, dear. Mom will work hard, so you should too. Okay, I want to be like you, Mom, so I'll do my best. Elsie gives me the strength to keep going. I met my true friend, Daisy. My happiness is all thanks to Elsie. I'd do anything for her, that's how strongly I feel.